With the Senior Bowl practices firmly in the rear view, it's time for a mock draft Friday. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you all for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Hello, everyone. My name is Zach Hicks, your favorite film nerd for horseshoehuddle.com. And my partner, Jake Arthur, couldn't join us today. He is driving halfway across the country to get back home from Mobile, Alabama. But don't worry, he is certainly, his impact is certainly still being felt. He was doing some great reporting down there in Mobile. We can't wait to have him back on the show again next week. But today, to honor Jake's work down there at the Senior Bowl, I'm doing a 3-round mock draft. Again, I think this is the perfect time for it. We're in late January, about to be in early February. We're starting to get familiar with the names in this draft class. So let's dive into who could be on the board for the Colts in round 1, round 2, and round 3. I'm not going to go much further past that because then I'll be listing like 400 names for you guys and it might just all get jumbled up. But I got 5 names for each round in today's mock draft. And then at the very end of each round, after I preview those 5 names, I will pick a player for this mock. And you guys can compare to me in the comment section. Tell me who you would take out of these 5 or who you would take in general, maybe aside from the 5 that I'm mentioning right here. But let's kick this bad boy off with round 1. And obviously we have to start this segment by talking about everyone's favorite player in round 1 for the Colts. I've rarely seen such a consensus from Colts fans, from Colts media, from national media. This seems to be the most popular mock draft destination for this player. He is starting to get a little bit more top 10 buzz right now, but he is very, very popular among Colts fans. Even Colts Reddit has a running joke that like every day someone has to say, bring this player to Indy. And that player obviously is tight end Tyler Warren from Penn State. And this feels like one of those situations where the Colts' biggest need is lining up with the best player that could be available at that pick. And again, that is Tyler Warren, the kind of like the Brock Bowers of last season, except, to me, Bowers was a bit better of a prospect, but Warren is probably a bit more complete overall as a tight end. Warren, more of a two-way type threat, more physically imposing than a Bowers, where Bowers was just such a plus asset in the receiving game that you couldn't ignore him for how high he went. But Tyler Warren is a very good receiving tight end in his own right. Really good pass catcher, great hands, has a little bit of that Jason Witten to him, but I think he's even more athletic than a Jason Witten ever really was. And he just uses his body really well. We see how great his hands are too in tight quarters. I mean, Tyler Warren, just a great fit for the Colts in this draft. And I totally understand why everyone is saying, bring this guy to Indy, get him to Indy. Yeah, I mean, fantastic fit. And he makes the Colts offense much better. A Colts offense that was outside the top 20 in almost every metric last year. It would be great to have a player like Tyler Warren for both the receiving game and the run blocking game, especially considering how bad the Colts tight end room was last season. Get a guy like Tyler Warren in here, and maybe he gives you a good 600-700 yards out the gate while being a plus blocker, and that's just an infinitely better upgrade than what they had this past season, just from the entire room in general. So Tyler Warren, it's justified. It's justified why people love him to Indy, and I totally get it for sure. The other big option, though, is safety Malachi Starks from Georgia. A guy who had a lot of buzz early in his career at Georgia, was getting playing time. I think it's like a true freshman, or it might have been his redshirt freshman season, but very, very good player. I think he can play some corner, some deep safety, some overhang safety. I think he plays some strong safety. I mean, very, very versatile player, super athletic, good size. And while he didn't have like this superb, like breakout, become a top 5 pick type season for Georgia, I still think we are kind of overreacting a little bit to this past season, and we're kind of getting into that Kyle Hamilton type of mindset with him, where we're going to let this very, very good safety slip a little bit just because everything's not perfect about him. I think Starks is every bit the player that he was supposed to be coming into the season, even with some of the struggles he had. And I think he can be a very, very good player from day one, and a really good, in this Lou Anarumo system where you have a lot of positionless football, you have a lot of defensive weapons. Getting a guy like Malachi Starks next to Nick Cross, next to Kenny Moore in that secondary, I think you have a lot of weapons for Anarumo to work with that ultimately just make this team better. So Malachi Starks, I think he's being a bit underrated right now. I think he's a really good player. Honestly, I'd probably take him top 10, top 12. And if he's there for the Colts at 14, I'd be very happy with that selection as of right now. Another tight end I have on the board here too, Colston Loveland from Michigan. Maybe not as big a name as Tyler Warren, especially in the Colts circles right now, but a very good player in his own right. He's tall, lanky, very smooth and fluid. I think he's a much better route runner than a player like Tyler Warren. Has really good hands as well. Didn't have the best stats this past season just because Michigan didn't have a quarterback who could throw the ball forward. I think Michigan forgot about the forward pass this past season, but Loveland was able to transition into more of a blocker this past year as a result, and got some good reps in as a blocking tight end. So I think overall is pretty good for his development, and you're going to get a guy coming in on day one who honestly might out-receive Tyler Warren in season one just because I think he's a lot smoother and he fits into an offensive system a little bit better as a pass catcher. And then you still get a guy who's adequate in the run game and can do some good things there as well. So Loveland or Warren, I think either of them would be really good picks at 14. Maybe not, home run selections, but I think they're both really good players who help the Colts immensely from the get-go as rookies. Even though the rookie tight end stigma of the past is still there, I think Brock Bowers and even Kyle Pitts in year one at least kind of broke that a little bit. So guys like Loveland and Warren could be big impact guys out the gate, despite past misconceptions about the tight end position as a rookie. I got two corners here to round out this group of five here. We got Benjamin Morrison from Notre Dame. Benjamin Morrison, I think he's awesome on film. He's big, athletic, playmaking corner. Not the most consistent. There will be some gaffes in his play, but very big time playmaker. And the Colts just haven't had that playmaker at corner in years. I mean, since maybe Vontae Davis in the mid 2010s, or I guess Stephon Gilmore in 2022, but we all like to forget that season. But Morrison, I think, has the potential to be a big-time playmaking corner in the NFL. It's just, how do you reconcile with the injury? That's really what the big question is when it comes to Morrison, especially if you're a Colts team who you're looking at a corner that you just took in round 2 years ago, and he's barely played in the NFL, and Juju Brents. Do you want to risk it by taking a guy who missed the majority of his last season due to a hip injury and might be a little bit behind because of that? I think that's a real concern right there. So Morrison, I think the film is good. I think he's a good playmaker, good young player as well. But again, you have to reconcile with that injury and maybe, if this is going to be a trend with him, because the Colts have drafted players who have, a trend now of injuries all on their roster. So we'll see. We'll see. I've seen a lot of Colts fans be down on that selection or be down on Morrison as a player kind of because of the injury. And I don't blame him. I mean, injuries are part of playing football, but it is scary right now with the state of the Colts roster. And then I had to throw a Senior Bowl guy on here as well, Azarai Thomas from Florida State. Big, lengthy, imposing corner that I really like his film. I think he could be a really good asset for Lou Anarumo in this defense. He kind of fits that height, weight, speed profile that Lou Anarumo likes. My only concern is I think 14 is a little bit too rich, so maybe in a trade back, or maybe for some reason he's there in round 2, you can nab him. But yeah, I think 14 is a bit too rich, but I do really enjoy his film, and I think he's going to be a good player. Only 20 years old, born in 2004, if any of you guys want to feel very old right there. 2004 birthday, so I think he'll be 21 during his rookie season. Very good player. I think he's going to be a good one in the NFL as long as he gets in the right system and cleans up some things. So Azarai Thomas at the Colts trade back, or maybe they just fall in love. I think 14 could be an option for him, but that does seem a little bit too rich right now. Maybe he blows up the combine and that changes some things. But my selection for round 1, after I just went rambling about all 5 of these players and what I like and dislike about them, obviously I need to go with what all the other mock drafts are saying for this first round. I'm going to go with tight end Tyler Warren from Penn State. Again, a little scary. He's getting some top 10 buzz, and the Colts might have to trade up to get him and make sure the Brock Bowers debacle doesn't happen yet again this draft season. But Tyler Warren, just on paper, is the perfect fit, the perfect player for this team, and he makes this Colts offense better. How could you not love Tyler Warren in round 1 to the Indianapolis Colts? Now, coming up, we're going to go through round 2. I got 5 more players on the board for round 2. And do the Colts have to go safety now, or can they go another position come round 2 with Tyler Warren gone in round 1? But first, attending NFL playoff games is an unforgettable experience that brings fans together. I have never personally been to an NFL playoff game, but I've been just to regular season games that have that energy, and I can only imagine that energy just being explosive come playoff time. This playoff season has been one full of memories just sitting at home watching. And imagine how much greater it would be to be at those games. And you can get there now with Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for events even easier. It filters out the fluff, so you only get incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands and thousands of tickets. Jake recently used Game Time Picks to find tickets for an upcoming event, and he was browsing through those deals, and he's telling me how simple it was and found some really great value for all the seats in the venue that he was going to. There's some really cool offers too, like the super deal was especially impressive, offering the best value for each and every event on there. Plus the on-time ticket delivery and lowest price guarantee give all of us that peace of mind that we need. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, Locked On Colts everydayers. We are back with Mock Draft Friday. You guys got to help me with some kind of alliteration there. You guys know how I love my alliterations. Mock Draft Friday does not sound pretty there, like Fun Draft Friday or something. I don't know. You guys let me know in the comments section there. But we're going to round 2 now after taking Tyler Warren in round 1 to really solidify this offense. You know, in this scenario, we're getting that pass catcher and that run blocker at tight end. The Colts offense is looking good. So now are we locked in at going defense, or are there still some options out there on offense as well? So here are the 5 names that I threw on here that we're going to go through, and 5 potential players for round 2. Again, in the comment section, let me know if there's someone I should have added to this list or someone else that you'd like to go with in round 2. I'd love to hear what your guys' options are. But first up, we got cornerback Darian Porter from Iowa State. You guys know that I just love those big, lengthy, former wide receivers at corner. Do I get burned by them every now and then? Sure, I do. Like we all do. We all fall in love with a certain type, and it all burns us. That's not even just true for football. That could be true for relationships and life in general. But Darian Porter is just my type of corner, and honestly, Juju Brents was too. So maybe I should look at something else. But I like Porter, man. I really like Porter in this draft. You know, again, you get that former wide receiver. He's got the ball skills. He's got the length. He's got the size. Height, weight, speed guy that fits this type of system. I think he had good feet on film as well. I just think he's a really good fit for what Lou Anarumo wants to do. And again, if you're going to have this system that's more diverse and more, you know, disguise heavy, more press man heavy, I think you need the dogs that can run with it. You know, Womack had a great year last year for the Colts, but he's not the biggest and most imposing player. He's not even the fastest player. So getting a height, weight, speed guy in here like Porter who can really show some things in camp and maybe compete for a starting job, I kind of like Darian Porter a good bit in round 2. Maybe it's going back to the same well that didn't work with Juju Brents, but I love his fit with Lou Anarumo, and I think he's faster than Juju Brents too. If that's if that's another stipulation in this, I think he has better long speed. So Darian Porter from Iowa State, a guy that I'm really fawning over, and hopefully, it doesn't turn out like past wide receivers that I've fallen in love with that convert to corner. Getting away from my self-deprecation there, safety Xavier Watts from Notre Dame. I know this is another big-time favorite of Colts fans right now. Xavier Watts, kind of a slow start to his career at Notre Dame, but this past year, again, when the Fighting Irish made that run to the national championship game this year, Xavier Watts was a massive, massive part of it. A big-time playmaker this past year, did everything for that Notre Dame defense. And it was kind of just, again, just that breakout campaign from him that he just put it all together. It was awesome to see. And he's really just propelled up the ranks. I mean, I've seen some people have him as a mid-first round type guy. So maybe he could be there at 14 for the Colts, maybe in a trade back in the late round 1. I've seen early round 2. I'm going to say he's an option for round 2 right now. But again, we will see come draft day. But Xavier Watts is certainly someone that Colts fans have circled in red and putting hearts all over him. Like I've seen the buzz that you guys have given him. I do think there are a little bit of concerns, again, kind of just a breakout season this past year as he was one of the older players on that defense. 23 years old. I think he's going to be 24 during his rookie season, or he might have just turned 23, but still a little bit of an older player. And that's kind of when the breakout happens. So that always does add a little bit of concern for me, but the film's good. The film's good. Xavier Watts is good. A big part of that Notre Dame defense, and the Colts need a safety. I'm smitten. You're smitten. I think he makes a lot of sense for this Colts team. Some other options I have here for the Colts in round 2, though. Offensive lineman Gray Zabel from North Dakota State. And yes, we say this every draft season. There's another North Dakota State offensive lineman, another guy that we're moving from offensive tackle to guard from North Dakota State. Will this one work out more than the Cordell Volsons and the Dylan Reduns, I think, came out a couple years ago as well? Will he work out better? Honestly, as someone who has scouted all of these North Dakota State guys, I think Zabel's the best of the bunch. I think he was inarguably the best interior offensive lineman at the Senior Bowl this season. Showed some really great things, really sturdy, powerful player. I think he projects well as a center or a guard. And in the event that the Colts, for some reason, don't re-sign Will Fries, I think he can be a day 1 starter at right guard. Or even if they do re-sign Will Fries, I think he could be a day 1 starter at center, which, again, Tanner Bortolini probably is your next guy up there. But I think a guy like Zabel really solidifies some things on your offensive line and takes away the depth concerns that Chris Ballard mentioned at offensive line in his end of season press conference. So I like Zabel a lot. I'm very, very high on him. I have a fringe first round grade on him. And if he's there for the Colts second round pick and he's the best player available, I'm all for it. I think he's a very, very good player. Next guy up here, though, running back Caleb Johnson from Iowa. I think round 2 is where the Colts should start considering running back. Not because I think Jonathan Taylor's a bad player or anything, but just to add more weapons to this offense. If this is going to be your last season with Anthony Richardson, or your last chance for Anthony Richardson, surround him with all the talent that you can and really just put your best foot forward. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I think Caleb Johnson could be a really good RB2 behind Jonathan Taylor, give some more lightning behind him in that backfield. We know Trey Sermon certainly wasn't that lightning last year, so maybe someone like Caleb Johnson could be that big-time playmaker, forces a lot of broken tackles, really good player, and I think he'd be a fantastic backup to Jonathan Taylor. And then lastly, linebacker Carson Schwessinger from UCLA. I hope I'm saying that name right there. But Carson Schwessinger, again, rangy, athletic, good cover guy. And the Colts need another linebacker. EJ Speed was not the guy last season. I think Jalen Carlisle I'm optimistic about, but if you have a chance to add a second linebacker to that room that can cover and run and fit the run really well, I think you have to do it. And if Schwessinger's there in round 2, I think he'd be a fantastic fit. I think he's a plug-and-play guy. And then from day 1, you have 3 guys in Franklin, Carlisle, and Schwessinger who can all play on your defense and really mix things up for Lou Anarumo. So linebacker, I really think the Colts need to consider going linebacker in this draft, whether that's round 2, 3, 4, wherever it is, just to add more speed and youth to that room. And Schwessinger is a guy who's really caught my eye so far in this draft class. So now that we've gone through the 5 names, who are we going with for our second round pick? Again, I have to default to what I think the Colts fans want. Maybe I'm just, trying to give you guys everything you love, but let's go with Xavier Watts here in round 2. Again, give the Colts that playmaking safety on the back end that has done, he just did it all last year in the state of Indiana anyway. He did it for Notre Dame. So yeah, let's get Xavier Watts here. Hopefully the tackling issues from 2023 don't pop back up, but Xavier Watts, I think, can be a very good player. And to put him back there with Nick Cross is giving Lou Anarumo A safety that can just make some plays. That's what the Colts need. More turnovers, more plays made. Xavier Watts. So we got Tyler Warren and Xavier Watts coming to Indy in this mock draft. How are we going to round it all out here in round 3? We're going to jump into this round 3 with 5 more prospects to talk about here in just a second. But first, the big game is almost here, and there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded, Prize Picks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. Here's how it works. You pick more or less on at least 2 players' projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. Prize Picks even has a free pick for the big game where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw for 1 yard to win. I think that's some easy money right there. So pair that with one more correct pick and you are cashing out. Check out the promos tab to tail any of the super sweet Millie winners big game lineups. And if you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, Locked On Colts everydayers, we are back talking more mock draft Friday, fun draft Friday, whatever alliteration I can come up with in the next 10 minutes. We're doing that here today on this Friday episode at the conclusion of Senior Bowl practice week. In the first round, we went Tyler Warren, tight end from Penn State. And in round 2, we went with safety Xavier Watts from Notre Dame. 2 players who I know Colts fans are very high on. So now, when it comes to round 3, I have to kind of go away from just leaning on you guys because I don't know who you guys want after the first 2 rounds. So now it has to become more of me in round 3. So you guys get more Zach Hicks instead of just the consensus for this first mock draft of the season. So I got 5 more names here, 5 guys that have stood out to me. And we'll see what you guys think here. Again, in the comment section, let me know if you would have put other names here or if you would take somebody else from this list of 5 players. I love to see your guys' feedback and comments below. But first up, we have one of the biggest standouts of Senior Bowl week, and that is defensive tackle Darius Alexander from Toledo. Absolutely dominant player all week, 6'5", 300 pounds. Those are verified measurements, cool, which is cool with Senior Bowl. I'm glad we finally get those verified measurements, but just had a truly outstanding week from day one. Super athletic player, explosive player, can control blocks at the point of attack, and was just disruptive all week. And that's really the biggest word when it comes to defensive tackles, and that's disruptive. That is just massive for these players. For a guy his size to move the way he does, it's fantastic. The film is just as good too. I've seen many people going back and looking at the film and being like, oh yeah, this guy was just flying under the radar. He's actually good on and off the practice field because this film is just as good. So yeah, Darius Alexander, the Colts have that Toledo connection too with Samuel Womack. Samuel Womack was campaigning for him on Twitter/X, whatever it's called now. And I believe Alexander's also from Fort Wayne, Indiana. So there's just a lot of ties here for Alexander to Indy. And with the Colts starting 2 defensive tackles being around that 30-year-old mark, and I know defensive tackles can typically go until 33, 34, more so than most positions, I still think the Colts need that 3rd defensive tackle. We've seen in the last couple years, every time one of those 2, with DeForest Buckner or Grover Stewart, anytime one of those 2 guys is off the football field, it becomes a disaster for the Colts. And the Colts like to rotate their defensive tackles, so they need to get a 3rd guy who can actually play on Sundays. And I think Darius Alexander is the perfect mix of developmental guy who can get there one day and be the next guy who could take over for them, but also a guy who can just play on Sundays and give some good snaps behind them, who doesn't have to carry the load from day one. So Darius Alexander, I'm kind of falling for him here in round 3. I think he'd be a really good fit. Next guy I have up here is a running back yet again. This is Quinshawn Judkins from Ohio State. We've been talking a lot about players that went to the national championship this past season. Well, this is a guy who won the national championship this past year. Judkins, 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons, and that's with sharing a backfield too. Like, he really hasn't been the number 1 running back at Ohio State. I mean, 1A and 1B essentially, but he has been sharing that backfield with Travion Henderson. But 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons, been doing some really good things for the Ohio State Buckeyes, and just a really, really well-rounded player. Can catch, can pass block, can run hard between the tackles, has the speed to get outside the tackles. Maybe not, he's not as flashy as a Travion Henderson, who might go in that late round 1, like early round 2 range. But Judkins is just the consummate professional type on film. He's the guy that you want in that running back room and the perfect guy to have as an RB2 until, Jonathan Taylor's contract runs out. And then maybe Judkins can take over as RB1 after that. I think Judkins just does everything really well. And the Colts running back backfield would, be so much better with a player like that behind Jonathan Taylor. So Judkins, again, another guy I really like in round 3, and I think he'd be a good fit for this Colts football team. Another linebacker here with the next one, linebacker Barrett Carter from Clemson. Just a good run and chase guy that you got to keep clean, some good instincts and coverage. I think in man, he's a little bit better than he is in zone. Zone, I think he can certainly get there. And the Colts, again, they just need a guy who can operate a little bit better in coverage, who has that next level speed, who can make some plays. And I think Carter could be a good developmental player to go alongside Carlisle, to go alongside Zaire Franklin this next season, and just add more talent to that linebacker room. Because again, I know this is a very simple concept, but it's better to have 3 playable linebackers than just 2. And with EJ Speed probably walking this offseason, getting in another young player like Carter to go alongside Carlisle and Franklin, I think just makes this overall defense so much better for Lou Anarumo. Next guy up here, cornerback Maxwell Hairston from Kentucky. Again, another height, weight, speed guy who's got some good hands, good feet. I like him in that press coverage at the line of scrimmage. Does a good job with the one-hand jabs up there to really disrupt receivers at the point of attack. And again, we're talking height, weight, speed guys to add to this cornerback room for Lou Anarumo. I think a guy like Hairston makes a ton of sense. Kentucky really knows how to coach up those DBs too. Andrew Phillips, I believe is his name, came out last year, and they've had multiple NFL players come out of there the last couple of seasons. This isn't just about scouting the helmet. This is about scouting what that helmet does for players. They get these guys ready for the NFL. And Maxwell Hairston, I think, is just the next one in this line of Kentucky corners that have been coming out in recent seasons. So Hairston, again, a guy that can play at the line of scrimmage. He's got good length, good size, can be a versatile piece for this defense. And again, that's what the Colts need for Lou Anarumo. Again, I think they go corner in free agency for him, but if they don't, a guy like Hairston does make a lot of sense in the middle rounds there and just makes the overall defense a little bit better. And then finally, I have another offensive lineman. Maybe it's just because offensive linemen's what I've been watching the most of for the Indy Draft Guide this offseason. But Tate Ratledge from Georgia, big, lengthy, strong offensive guard. I think he can play a little bit tackle if you need him to, but he does remind me a little bit of Will Fries in terms of just that body mass and size that he brings at the guard position. Really good run blocker and getting better as a pass blocker as well. If the Colts let Will Fries walk, which again, I would be throwing something at Lucas Oil Stadium when I'm there in Indy next month because you can't let Will Fries walk. But if they do, I think Ratledge could be a good plug-and-play starter in round 3 for this Colts team. And if they do bring back Will Fries, Ratledge could be just that 6th offensive lineman that can bounce around as a backup in year 1 and just solidify the depth on the offensive line. I know it's not sexy, but the Colts need to always draft offensive linemen to make sure they never get in a situation like 2022 or even a situation where, like last year, where Dalton Tucker is starting for a little over a month of play. So Ratledge could kind of solidify a little bit of the depth on that Colts offensive line. But with those 5 guys in mind, who am I going with here in round 3? Again, we're going to go with the local kid. We're going to go with Darius Alexander, defensive tackle from Toledo. Maybe you should make a point to go for corner in future mock drafts with this one, just because the Colts need a corner more than need a defensive tackle. But Alexander, on the heels of just a dominant Senior Bowl week, and with this mock draft coming at the end of Senior Bowl practice week, it's only fitting to put Alexander as the guy here in round 3. So again, to wrap it all up, we went with Tyler Warren, tight end from Penn State in round 1, Xavier Watts, safety from Notre Dame in round 2, and Darius Alexander, defensive tackle from Toledo in round 3. You guys let me know in the comment section how I did on this first mock draft Friday of the year. If you guys would have done anything different, or if you guys would add any new names to the 5 I put in each round. That's all we have for today, but I do want to thank you guys for making Locked On Colts your first listen today and every day. Next, go find Locked On NFL. First, the madman Tyler Rowland kicks off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso, and then stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. And if you guys want to become a Locked On Colts insider and chat with us directly, get that insider scoop, and also have a direct line to roast us after the show, follow the link in our show notes. And if you guys don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks 2, all on Twitter. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. We love your guys' ratings, reviews, and we'll catch you guys back here early next week.